Okay, well, you guys ready?
Ever.
Might as well just jump right in. Um, okay, thanks guys for joining for the panel today. We're at the Crin Pavilion at COP here in Baku. Today we're going to be looking at what it takes to build a roadmap or what that roadmap might look like to achieve enhanced methane objectives and some of those ambitions that are being put out there now. And we've got a good mix of industry, technology, and government here to look at what that roadmap might include, what some of those pieces will be for continuing to make progress on decreasing methane emissions across industry. I'm Tim Shaw from Tourmaline. Uh, I think what I'll do now is I'll just have you guys go down the panel. We'll make sure our mics work. Say who you are, where you're from, and we'll tackle intros that way. So, Patrick.
Oh, perfect. Again, pleasure to be here. I'm Patrick McDonald. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister of Air, Climate, and Clean Technology with the Government of Alberta.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here as well. Thank you for having me. I'm Jean-François J.F. Gauthier. I'm Senior Vice President of Strategy at GHGSA, and we're a company that monitors greenhouse gas emissions using our own satellites and aircraft sensors.
Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Folk. I'm the Director of Emissions and Innovation at Tourmaline. For those that don't know the name Tourmaline, we're Canada's largest natural gas producer.
Great. All right. Okay, we're gonna jump right into questions, and uh, I'll start by asking questions to specific panelists, but feel free to jump in any time and just build off answers. So, Patrick, we're gonna start with you. So last year was my first COP in and at that COP, Alberta was coming to the table and saying that it made progress in achieving its 45% methane reduction target, which was impressive, incredible, and like a great achievement. And then this year, gone even further. Alberta has made even more progress and now knows that it's past that target. So I want you to speak a little bit about that and what that achievement is. But can you also give a little bit of history, kind of the background of regulating methane and emissions in Alberta and how we kind of got to where we are today in the province?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks a lot for that, Tim. And again, I know it's a little bit of a path down history here because again, this journey really started in the late '90s when we started tackling flaring emissions within Alberta, and so initially it was how do we ensure methane is the flaring is done in a manner that is clean, environmentally responsible, and looking to again reduce that. Now we're moving, we shifted gears into methane as there was understanding of its kind of properties as a global warming greenhouse gas. And I guess again I'm really pleased that the right now it's really a success story that ultimately the result has been, as Tim noted, that we have surpassed our initial target that was set. But again, that started with Alberta being the first to really set a regional target in North America and likely the world in terms of what understanding the methane emissions. And so in just about probably 7 8 years ago, the government looked at it and said, look, we understand this is an opportunity, and we understand that we have the technology and need to develop the technologies to be able to make a dent in that. And so a 45% reduction target from 2014 volumes was initially that set. And again, I'm really pleased to say that now we've exceeded that 52% reduction. We released that last week. And one piece, not only we implemented the technology to get there and the operational and worked alongside industry stakeholders, academia, to do that in a manner that's really cost effective and enabled production to continue to be moving on in that space. The regulation, the kind of framework that was done for moving that was through a combination of through the Alberta Energy Regulator. They have a regulations called directives. And so one directive was related to, flaring, venting, incinerating, and the other directive was related to measurement and monitoring, because that's one piece is, in order to reduce something, you need to understand, where it is, where it's coming from, and really how to advance that. But more than that as well, you know, there was another element to that, which is an incentive-based policy approach, which levered other elements within Alberta's policy, which really drove investments into methane reduction technologies and enabled that kind of driver to get those out into commercial frames and reduce on the ground. So you know, we're looking forward to post 2025. You know, we're not stopping there, but it's been a success story to date. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, great. And you know, um, we're hearing more and more comments about that 52% target that you know you've hit, and how that's not a hard stop, right? How we're making more progress, building on that day after day. So I can't wait to hear what we're at next year.
Yeah, no, me too.
Yeah. Okay, Jean-Francois, we're gonna toss this next one your way, but Scott, it might be something that you have got some insight into as well. So just be ready for a follow up on that one. Technology and innovation have played a significant role in enabling industry to address methane emissions. So tell us a bit about the role of innovation as you see it, and how your company is building on that role, enabling that.
Well, thank you. And it's a really interesting question, because for us at GHGSat, it's certainly a mix of innovating, pushing the limits, but also targeting or tailoring our innovations to the needs of those we serve. So regulations, industry. So it's not sufficient to simply innovate for the sake of innovating. If nobody wants to, can make use of that innovation, it's pointless. There's just you're not driving progress. So for us, it was certainly instrumental very early on to have the support from Alberta. ERA was a really big supporter in launching our first commercial satellite, and that really launched several relationships as well in the province with operators like Tourmaline. And it's made a huge difference in not just devising a technology that's useful, but also applications. Like, technology is only the first step. It has to be usable. It has to be user friendly, and it has to be, our users have to be able to consume it in a way that can drive towards the objectives that we're looking forward. So when we talk about exceeding these objectives here, there's a lot of technologies that drive this, a lot of measuring technologies, but also sort of abatement technologies that are put in place, and they really need to be tailored to that. So I think that's the point I'd like to emphasize here for sure.
Yes. So Scott, maybe I can get you to give sort of the Tourmaline side of that story too, because I know that we use GHGSat. So maybe can you speak to how technologies like that are informing the work that you and your team do, and our understanding of sort of our emissions and our approach at Tourmaline?
Yeah, we can talk about how measurement has really helped us understand our emissions and understand kind of business intelligence in order to invest in the right places. And I know lots of regulation and regulators think that measurement's about proving your emissions performance. But you'd be surprised how valuable it is in really understanding your emissions profile and having the proper business intelligence to invest in the right things. So what Tourmaline does in order to have this grand picture and use real intelligence and real data when focusing on reducing our emissions on the methane front and putting them on the right place, we kind of take a all approach. So you mentioned that we use GHGSat and we have for some time. So we have that kind of global picture of if there is a major emissions, and really we get a good picture on our competitors. We get a good picture on the rest of the world and understand where emissions are coming from by using GHGSat. And then we use a technology that's an aircraft-based technology called Bridger. And then we fly that across all of our sites. So that's a pretty unique thing to Tourmaline, that to fly that many sites with Bridger, but we fly all of our sites with Bridger, and that gives us an understanding of where emissions are coming from, and that's going to go down to like the 3 kilogram per hour type of range to get a good understanding of all the different sources of emissions and where the opportunities are to fix it. And then we keep going down and down from there. So we use a number of continuous monitors. We're one of the few companies that has a TrustWell certification. So TrustWell certification is by Canary Projects. And they have this thing where you run a continuous monitor on a well site, and then with that continuous monitor on a well site, then you can have a certified gas that's certified by their accreditation. And we run a number of other continuous monitors as well. And then there's kind of the normal regulatory pieces that are part of that are standard with regulation, which would be OGIs and inventory. So So between all these different things, we've got specific devices, specific inventories, calculations and emissions factors, OGIs, continuous monitors, all the different technologies give us a grand picture of our entire portfolio and a huge amount of business intelligence in order to really understand where to focus our efforts and then how we fit and how future regulations will evolve around and how we work into those regulations because we have a really strong understanding of our emissions and where they're coming from.
So that's perfect because I'm coming right back to you with the next one. And so we're using technology and innovation. It's really helping industry understand emissions, especially on the methane front, where they're happening, and across not just our operations but in other places. I mean, one of the most eye-opening things is looking at Canada's emissions profile versus other regions, and if you want to see evidence of like high performance, I think that's one of the clearest examples. But so that's obviously important, but then taking that step back before that, we've made a lot of progress with the innovation, but a lot of it's been driven by regulation and by policy. So we're talking about a regulation, a roadmap here. So are regulations the roadmap? Is it the path we have to follow, or what role do they play as we go forward? So Patrick, I'm coming to you next on this one, but maybe we'll start with Scott.
Oh no, I'm gonna steal all the things that Patrick's probably gonna say. So regulations are an important part, and they always will be an important part. You need some amount of regulations, but we're a very diverse industry. We've got a lot of different things going on across Alberta. I actually don't think there's a known type of oil and gas that Alberta doesn't have. There's oil sands, there's SAGD, there's mining, there's thermal, there's conventional oil, there's natural gas, there's shallow gas. And between all these different things, regulation is quite difficult, and regulation will become more difficult as we're going to higher ambition. But one of the great things that Alberta does is they think about regulation or policy as more than just regulation. There's definitely regulation, and I believe you always need that, and that there will be some increased ambition on that regulation. But they also think about it as policy. So there's this policy approach that I kind of used before, putting a bounty on or like the most wanted in Alberta is methane, and that way when we look for opportunities to reduce methane emissions, there's an opportunity to get some of your tier funding dollars back or some of your carbon tax back through things like the tier fund. So I would say yes, there's definitely regulation as part of the pathway. That it needs to be really thoughtful regulation that will be workable, but that's only one part of it. And I think one of the awesome things about Alberta, I believe that most of the oil and gas companies are already on the path and trying to reduce methane emissions regardless of regulation. You can see that in the numbers. Like Tourmaline started significantly before there was any regulations as far as methane emissions reductions go, and you can see there hasn't been increased regulation, and there has been significantly increased emissions reductions. We passed the 45% target to 52, and that's been driving on the back of policy rather than regulation. So I think both things are important. And I'm sorry, Patrick, I'm probably stole everything you're about to say.
No, I think I'm going to build on that a little bit, Scott, because again, we're talking about regulations as a roadmap. I don't think I'd necessarily characterize them as the roadmap, maybe more so as a vehicle, a vehicle to get where you're going. We're setting a destination. You can get there in many different ways. And the regulation is just maybe one pathway along that way to help get and make progress towards that. And so as such, there's other ways that are going to contribute us getting to that final destination. And initially regulations were a part of that trip, and included some prescriptive elements that said, okay, well, if you're not aware of all the things that are going to get you, here's kind of a base or a baseline list of things that you can do that we think are going to deliver a positive outcome. And many operators have chosen to do that. But of all of the list of the technologies that Scott mentioned in terms of monitoring, in terms of doing the flyovers, in terms of again doing the GHGSat and participating in some of those pieces of technology on the services that JF provides. That really comes from more of a flexibility component, and in terms of that we understand that with all the different types of production and industry across Alberta, all the list of which, you know, Scott noted, you know, one size fits all is pretty difficult to manage. You know, you've got natural gas production, you've got heavy oil production, conventional oil. And so as such, yeah, there's certain things that you can prescribe, but enabling that flexibility is, I'd say, probably, again, one of the key components of Alberta's regulatory framework that enables us to do things more cost effective and enables us to really be nimble in terms of if someone is doing something better and wants to apply it, there's a process for that. They can apply to the regulator and say, you know, we think this is delivering a better outcome. But again, there's a backstop there that business as usual is going to make that contribution. So the other piece I would just note, that again, that understanding of the regulations and approval, you know, we really are looking at other policy approaches. So we have regulations, and we're flexible in some of those elements, but looking at those other arms, like how are you driving and incentivizing investment in the different types of technologies to get those deployed. And so that's where really some of the unique pieces, I think, to Alberta as well, complementary pieces such as programs that are looking at baseline monitoring. As Scott noted, if you don't know what's out there, you're not likely to be able to reduce. So an initial program was a baseline reduction opportunity application process, which enabled companies to go out there and look at all their operations, find out what was out there, and then so that they could take some appropriate activities to help make progress. So is it the roadmap in itself? I'd say, you know, my position would be no. You know, it's really a mechanism complementary with others to get us where we need to go.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And, you know, when we were back at the office talking about what this panel topic was going to be, we were kind of debating whether or not to call it a roadmap, because the roadmap seems pretty firm and fixed, and really the path forward can't be that, you know, constrained. It has to have some flexibility to it, like you said. So I love the concept of the regulations being one of the vehicles on the road, but there's going to be many different things that we have to do as well, which, you know, JF, we're going to maybe toss this one to you. So I don't want to get too cheesy on our panel, but if we're talking about a roadmap, if we're on a trip, right, we've made one stop, but we've got lots more ahead of us. So what are those next things that need to happen for us to keep working towards that destination of reducing emissions?
Well, it's interesting hearing the description of like a roadmap or not. And I see it like when I use Google Maps and there's traffic, and like Google Map reroutes me as I go. So the roadmap is not necessarily fixed. It changes as we go. And
I'm used to MapQuest, right? I can print it off here.
So you know, I was listening to the answers here and the responses, and trying to, you know, reflect about what drives us to innovate. And regulations are a big part of that, but they're not the main driver. And I think that's a recurring theme here that we've heard. So they're certainly part of the equation, something that we keep an eye on. But a lot of our a lot of our customers, a lot of the operators that we work with are driven by doing the right thing, regardless of regulations being in place or not. And a lot of times regulations are upcoming, they're in the future, or they're evolving. But operators are already doing something, you know, wanting to apply technologies and start driving down emissions. So so that's certainly, you know, in our history, that's what's been our initial driver. The other problem is that or challenge is that for a new technology to be used for reporting for regulatory, you know, purposes, there needs to be a lot of validation. It's a long process. A lot of regulations are very prescriptive as to what technologies are even allowed to be used. So it's only in the last 5 years, I'd say, where you saw a lot of openness to having mechanisms in place for new technologies to be brought forward. And that's been driven a lot by operators saying, you know, if we're going to comply with these regulations, we need to be able to access different technologies so that it's cost effective for us. It's even realistic to do this. So, but ourselves right now, we're at a place where we've gone through that validation. We've gone through a lot of testing, and I think the confidence is there that the technology can be used. The mechanisms are there within the regulations in Canada, in the US, and other places now where new technologies can be deployed for regulatory purposes, which kind of becomes a bit of a game changer.
I kind of want to play off that a little bit because it's one of the things that I'm most proud of in Alberta is how fast we've helped evolve some of these technologies and how fast we've grown and what's kind of existed or exists now that didn't exist before. So how Tourmaline is using all those different technologies in order to better understand our business intelligence around methane. A lot of those technologies didn't exist 4 or 5 years ago. So part of why it's hard for regulations to catch up and have them built into the build these new technologies in the regulation is because they didn't even really exist. So there really wasn't a path to have a fixed regulation that can say you should use this type of aircraft or you should use this type of continuous monitor or define what they would look at because they were just developed. And one of the things I'm most proud of about Alberta is it really has an incredible ecosystem to drive and develop those types of tools. So between things like the Natural Gas Innovation Fund Emissions Testing Center, which helps validate those technologies that allows different things to kind of prove that they do work. We do controlled releases and test different detection thresholds and different probabilities of detection. And that way they can go out and sell to other customers, but also show regulators that yeah, their technology is capable of it. But what an incredible thing to say how fast we've innovated and how fast we've, as Alberta, really got behind reducing methane emissions, that all these technologies all exist. And I do have to give a whole bunch of credit to the tier program for that because putting that dollar out there to say reducing emissions is important to Alberta, and here's this huge opportunity, brought all this innovation into Alberta, stood up a whole bunch of clean tech companies, and really drove producers like us in order to reduce emissions in the space and do it really quickly. So I think this like policy is designed to have outcomes is a pretty incredible thing that Alberta does, and pretty proud of Alberta and all the different things that we've done to reduce emissions, especially in this space.
Well, and just to build again, to close the loop on that one, just that approach and that design and that flexibility, is a key contributor on why we achieved this target. Our initial targets, we had 3 years ahead of schedule, and why we're surpassing it. And I'm really encouraged on again, obviously the great progress is made, but it's again putting out that challenge to the industry, to the technology, and to academia, and that's why again we've had all these different opportunities and really collaboration, I'd say, to overachieve in this space.
So Patrick, I'm going to stay with you for this next one here. There's lots of twists and turns on this path forward, right? We've heard some of these steps, but and next steps that are required. But what are some of the challenges that you see? Like, what are some of the real tough parts that we're going to have to overcome? Because there's been lots of conversation this week as well that about low hanging fruit, and we've done some of the easy stuff, and it's getting harder and harder and more expensive to do these emission reduction projects. Like, what are the next challenges from your perspective?
Yeah, well, you raise a good point. Is however you refer to them, low hanging fruit or whatnot. I'm gonna just maybe call them as like kind of the sure bets. And we understood them. They're something that we were able to design a regulatory framework, and the staff were to be able to encourage adopting and resolving those. At the end of the day, you're going to run out of sure bets. There's only so many sure bets in the system, right? And then you're progressing into what does come into a little bit of uncertainty. So you're one, either we don't really necessarily understand the issue, or it's intermittent, or it's tough to abate, and we are getting into some of those pieces, and unfortunately those are a little bit more difficult to tackle, but they if we take the innovative approach and the investment and understanding, that's really going to be the critical element. And so those pieces, they need a little bit of a push. They're not going to be easy, and but that being said, we need to ensure that we're setting up the environment, and so that it makes sense that if things do need a little bit of investment to prove out that technology, or a little bit of encouragement, that the frameworks enable that. But that being said, we need to make sure that we're not pushing things that are uneconomic, because again, that's always at the back of minds, is you need to have a project does need to make sense, and it does need to be successful. And so really taking stock in where we're at right now, we have a great deal of learnings, we've had a great deal of success, so let's take a little bit of stock in terms of what has worked, what has enabled us to deliver that, And then what's the best way to go forward? I know we're doing the map analogy and whatnot, but it's kind of, again, when you ever come to a Y in the path here, instead of just running down one way, it's usually good to kind of take a little bit of stock, understand, okay, well, what makes the most sense, and which way do I want to proceed? And so, I think we're really at a critical point right now to be able to say, okay, what have we learned? What is out there? All these new technologies that didn't exist the first time around, they exist now. So how are we going to deploy them effectively, and how is industry going to deploy them effectively to make really that new the next wave here? And so, really excited about it, but I think stay informed, and I guess again, stay tuned, and look forward to tackling that with everyone.
Yeah, I want to get JF to talk about challenges, because you guys have put satellites into space, so the hard part must be done. What are the next challenges that you see going forward in this space?
I'll quote our CEO Stefan, that many of you know well, and he's famous for saying that launching the satellites is the easy part,
Okay.
not the hard part. So we have 12 in orbit now. We're generating massive amounts of data all around the world, and we've made a decision early on to not be the type of service provider that just generates data and throws it over the fence and runs away. So we really work hard to find the right mechanisms, the right levers, the right buttons to push to help our customers really realize the potential of that data. So that looks very different, in Canada than it does in the region here, for example, in Central Asia. The challenges are very different. But the reductions that are driven by our data are a very small portion of everything that we see. So in 2023, we reduced, our data was used to reduce 6 megaton of CO2 equivalent around the world. So that sounds interesting. It's 1.4 million cars off the road for a full year, so it's nothing to sneeze at. However, it's a very small fraction of everything that we measure around the world. So we see that as the big challenge. We have 9 more satellites on order. We have a good recipe now. It's actually not that challenging anymore, but it's actually driving reductions. And again, like, the challenges in other parts of the world are different than they are in Canada, but that's our focus at this point.
Yeah, so taking that data, that information, putting it into action, doing something meaningful with it, is now becoming the hard part. Scott, how do you take that data that you're collecting from all these different sources, and how do you put that into action? Because Tourmaline's made some good progress in reducing methane emissions. So how do you approach the processing and the understanding of that data to really put into action?
Yeah, so that was a huge undertaking that the team has taken on. I don't think there's very many places in the world, and definitely not very many companies that have as many data sources coming in as we do. So the fact that we have GHGSat coming in, we've got Bridger coming in, we've got continuous monitors, we have OGI inspections and things like that. All that data that comes in. What the team had to do, and we're trying to support other companies to also build some software to do this. But in the meantime, what we had to do is build our own software to be able to take that data, bring it in, and build intelligence out of it. So I think we may have stolen a trademark here, but we're calling it Bridger BI. So we essentially bring all that data in. So we have all the different flight data. We've been able to team up with a Calgary-based company called StackDX, and we have it so the plumes actually show up on a mapping system and on our software over top of the plants, and you can go see them on your phone. So when we're actioning intelligence to the field, we actually have an entire data system where we're cross-referencing all of our different data sources to our reported numbers. We're validating whether some of those sources are known emission sources or whether they'd become fugitive. And then we take that all and we build this, and it goes into an automated action plan. So from that, we run it through an algorithm, it kicks off an action plan. Our field operators look at that data again on their phones, which is an awesome new age that we're in. And then they can say, okay, well, this is what Bridger's saying, this is where the plume's at. And then they have to go see it and be like, okay, was that a pumper? Was that a known emissions, or is that a fugitive? And they have to reconcile that right on the spot as well. So that way we're getting all the different data sources all together to where we can really action it. And that took a lot of innovation all on its own. Right now, we're supporting some of the other companies to try to pass us. We're hopeful. We've supported Aerolytics, for example, to build this same software instead of in a Bridge or BI platform, but in a different platform so that it can be more available to everyone else as well. So we're hopeful that they pass us. For now, we've kind of got this tool and it's working quite well for Tourmaline. Quite proud of it. But yeah, it takes a lot of effort to take all this data and really action it.
Yeah, so I'm seeing here that the roadmap is forming, right? We've got the regulatory and policy environment that provides some flexibility on how to move towards a target. It kind of frames up the challenge and what problem it is we need to solve. We've got these innovators and technology companies that see this and they say, okay, well, there's other information that we need to bring in here in order to help solve that problem. Here's how we're going to do it. And then the operators that have to actually action that information are taking some pretty innovative approaches on how to understand it and how it impacts specific operations. So it's starting to see a thread tie between some of these things, which is it's always nice on a panel. Maybe we might have addressed some of this one, but I'm still going to kick this one over to you guys on how technology fits into the roadmap. So obviously understanding the data, capturing the information, generating that. What roles do you guys see? And maybe we'll hit all three of you with this one, but that role of technology in moving forward with emission reduction. How is this going to evolve? How is it going to build? What's next for technology on that roadmap? We can start with JF. I feel like this is a good place to
All right.
start.
All right. Well, I think my fellow panelists might be even better placed than I am to comment on this, but I can tell you from our perspective, what's interesting, what's been driving us is to really go away from this bottoms up estimates and provide real data. And eventually reconciling those estimates with the top-down measurements. Historically, emissions have been estimated using emissions factors that are inflexible and inadequate in a lot of cases, and not really serving the purpose. So one of the main motivations is to really kind of get away from that and have real information in order to make decisions that ultimately are they're business wise, but they're also that they're driving towards the right goal. Estimates are useful if that's the only thing you have. But I think now with this ecosystem of technologies that exist, satellites are one part of it, but I think we've touched on a lot of the many different technologies here, like drones, like aircraft, in situ sensors, and so on, that can really start providing a full picture and kind of move away from these estimates and track progress a lot more accurately.
I might be a little bit of a challenge on that one. So we can go back and forth, debate this a little bit. I do agree with what you're saying, that we do need to use all the tools in the toolbox to get a proper understanding of our emissions. But I haven't like running the emissions testing center. One of the most eye-opening things is that there isn't one silver bullet, and it does take that entire ecosystem and the engineered calculations based on inventories with run hours and operating conditions. And then in Alberta, even there's also the methane percentage of the gas that's in there. There's lots of times that engineering calculations are significantly better than some of the technologies can measure as well. So I would propose that it's going to be a hybrid of, it's not just you can measure it and it'll be fixed type of thing on all points. In my mind, it really does take the entire ecosystem and then blending them together. But there's something beautiful about taking an engineered calculation or an inventory thing or type of measurement and then comparing it to a top-down analysis and really understanding where they differ, and then kind of critically thinking about which one's more correct for the application and why, and what that means to kind of emissions reductions. And then turning that into action or intelligence is also quite interesting and fun, because you can, I'm going to draw a graph in my mind. I don't know how well I'm going to do this for everyone else, but imagine you're lining up all of your emissions as far as highest to lowest, and you're building this kind of graph that goes out into the future. Because of that business intelligence, Tourmaline's been able to line all those emissions up from highest to lowest and focus on the ones that are the most critical for hitting our emissions intensities right from start to finish. And using all these tools and using really solid intelligence on measurement has allowed us to line up all those in an order of kind of lowest hanging fruit and really focus on reducing emissions in what we think is the right order.
Well, these two have, covered a lot of ground there. I would just maybe just finalize with in terms of, a key role that technology can play is enabling focus, right? So, if resources are always going to be constrained, and so, if it enables us to do things a different way or enables us to shift those resources into doing other things, then ultimately we're going to be further ahead. And so that's why continuing to ensure we're investing in technology development and ensuring the programs are driving that, it's going to put us way further ahead in the future.
Great. So before I go to the panelists for sort of final thoughts and closing comments, is there anybody in the audience that wants to ask a question at all? Any? No, we've covered it all. Okay, well then let's go to any comments. So anything that comes to mind in terms of next steps, opportunities, challenges. How is this space going to change and grow as we continue to strive to meet those increasing ambitions?
Well, I would just note again what's next and opportunities. So what's next? I think higher reductions are on the menu. We've already proven we've surpassed other targets. There is going to be additional and not only be from the existing, but as these new technologies are put in the new developments, they're going to be starting at a lower percentage. So our intensities overall are going to be progressing, and that's necessarily a story that you don't always hear is not only are we doing things better on our existing portfolios, but our new portfolios are going to be outcompete others because of the performance there. And we're, again, not standing still and just looking at that initial one. The other piece I would note that, we can anticipate is just, the sharing of our technology, sharing of our policy learning, sharing of our approach, beyond Alberta, throughout Canada and the world to say, so that's a lens that we're again, as within our policy framework is trying to do is share that and share the learnings and so that we can, have the outcomes that we've had success for in Alberta and take those a little bit more, from a global perspective, which is again, why an important conversation to have and why we think it's worthwhile.
Well, it's hard to add much more to that, but the one thing you mentioned earlier, sure bets. We're running out of sure bets. I mean, I think it's to be expected that we'd see a lot of reductions early on because we're addressing some of the biggest leaks. And I think one of the keys here should be to not get frustrated now because the hard work, not that it wasn't hard, but a lot of the hard work will start now to see more progress. That will need to redouble the efforts to really start tackling the ones that are not as sure in terms of bets. And for that, technology will need to continue to advance and innovate, not just detection technology, but also technologies, but also abatement technologies and even data management platforms, and so that it becomes a full ecosystem of solutions that can help do this. Because now, the bigger ones are addressed. You're dealing with a lot more of the smaller ones, and that's been the case in Alberta for some time now. I mean, with our satellites, we see much less comparatively with the US, for example. And so I think a lot of the hard work has been done. Like the kind of the roadmap that we talked about is here. So I just I was just reflecting a little bit on the fact when we talked about sure bets that it will get harder, but I think the ecosystem in Alberta is well set up to handle it. Both from the flexible regulations to the operators that are already very well versed in deploying these technologies. So I think it'll be interesting to see next year where we're at. I think it's an exciting time.
Yeah, I think that maintaining the focus and trying to manage that frustration as things plateau and go up, and it's not going to be a consistent trajectory to to zero all the time. That's going to be important not just for ourselves, but there's obviously a lot of other groups and stakeholders that are very interested in this emissions conversation. So that's something that's got to be managed, not like outside of this room for sure, with those conversations. So that's a great flag. Scott, anything from you?
Yeah, I see a few different things coming down the future. And I think some that are going to be really interesting and kind of look forward to. One of them being this kind of idea that I think it's finally going to come out that satellites are going to be are going to have such a good look at the entire world that it's going to be hard for the world to ignore how good Alberta is doing now as far as methane performance. So now that there's things coming out like methane performance credits and things like carbon border adjustments and different people are looking at whether they import LNG based on the methane performance. I think we're finally going to be at this point where the whole world is going to be able to see what I get what I've been snooping around in GHGSat for a very long time, looking at with extreme amount of frustration that our story isn't getting out there as to how high our performance is already. So it'll be incredible to actually show and have a level playing field and an equal measuring stick and actually show what Alberta's performance really is. So I'm super excited for that path. And then as we continue on and continue to reduce more and more emissions, I guess one of the things that I'm not concerned with, but something to kind of keep in mind is that this is getting exponentially harder as we get further and further and further, and as we kind of compete with our own targets and our own goals, it gets harder and harder and harder as we get further past this carbon abatement curve. The smaller sources become more and more difficult, and it's not a linear progression. It starts to ramp up to become exponential. So it's something that I think there's still some opportunity left. We're excited to take it on at Tourmaline, but it is going to get harder and harder, and I think the world has to kind of define out what zero methane or near zero really defines as, so that we kind of focus on the right parts the whole way through. So that I think that's something that's coming, and then running the methane emissions testing center, we get to see all sorts of awesome technologies coming down the line. And I'm super excited for all the new technologies that are coming, and they're very welcome in that we really don't have the technologies to solve all of the problems today. We definitely have a technology or two that solves the problems, but as we get closer and closer to having 100% of the sources solved with a certain technology or certain problem, you need really, really advanced, cost-effective technologies in order to get across 100% of a market. So super excited to see that S-curve of technologies keep getting better and better and have more solutions to really hit all these different sources as we move on through this journey of methane reductions.
Yeah, great. So, okay, appreciate all those comments. I think we can wrap up the panel now. But what I'm hearing is both behind us and in front of us, there's sort of two key ingredients that on this panel and in others throughout this conference I've heard come up, and that's innovation and collaboration. Whether that's innovation from a policy and regulatory perspective, or actual technology, or how you implement and interpret and then apply the learnings from that, there's a ton of innovation, and collaboration is really what's enabling all of that to advance as well. And those ingredients we find, in big quantities in Alberta for sure, and across Canada. So some encouraging signs for sure as we continue to move forward. So yeah, appreciate all of you for your time and your insights today, and I guess we'll see you next year.
Thank you.